Where do I cut the log? Hi, I'm Kent and welcome to Turn a Wood Bowl. Today we're going to talk about where you cut a log to turn it into a bowl blank, to bring it to the lathe and turn it into a bowl. It seems like it should be pretty straightforward. You just cut it, right? Well, not quite. There are so many things in wood turning, like so many other aspects of life, that are up to your personal preference. If you're turning with a bowl gouge, you can decide what the bevel angle of that bowl gouge is. It could be in a pretty wide range, and it's going to make the turning characteristics and your turning style different depending on what you use. I've got a video all about that in case you're interested. But with this particular aspect of cutting a log in half, there is really one right way to do it. And I'm going to explain to you why that way is right in this video. One of the things you're going to want to do when you're cutting logs from a tree that's laying on the ground is you're going to clean up the edge or the end of the tree. So the first thing I'm going to do with this particular log is I'm going to cut off a small section of the end. And that's going to give me a better idea of what is happening inside this particular piece of wood. Now, once that is accomplished, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and cut 3 smaller logs that I'm going to then cut in half. Typically, when we're first learning to turn wood bowls, we will start turning bowls from side grain mounted blanks that aren't too large. And usually they'll come from logs that are found in the ditch, or maybe a neighbor brings them over for you, or they're pretty manageable. They're not huge, massive logs. And that's what we're going to be focusing on today. You're not going to make a really big, huge salad bowl out of one of these logs necessarily. And the technique I'm sharing with you is really designed for logs that are, say, 10 inches or maybe 25 centimeters in diameter or smaller. I mean, you could get up a little bit larger than that as well, but typically we're not going to be using this technique with very large logs. To learn how to process large logs and small logs and everything in between, plus all the aspects of maintaining and managing this whole process of processing your own timber, you're going to want to check out my Tree to Bowl Understanding Green Wood online course. Now, in this course, I'm going to go over everything you need to know for processing your own wood to make bowl blanks. And there's a ton of information. This course is also guaranteed. If for some reason you're not happy with this course, I will give you your money back. That's how confident I am that you're going to learn some great information from this course. So check that out. Okay, as I'm cutting out these logs, I'm noticing that the pith, or the very center of this log, is not perfectly centered in the tree. And that is very common. It's very rare, actually, to have a pith that is perfectly centered in a tree. Now, why is that pith off-centered? Well, there's a variety of different reasons. There could be wind or weather conditions that's causing one side of the tree to grow faster than the other side. There could be water conditions, the roots, the sun. There's all sorts of different things. Now, if you have a limb that is up higher in the tree that's sticking out, then you have the weight. The weight typically underneath that limb is going to make that area thicker and wider, and you'll find that the pith is up higher on the top side of those trees. So if you're cutting limbs from the top of the tree, you can actually tell where the bottom of that limb was and where the top of the limb was by locating the pith and finding the pith closer to the top. That's just kind of an interesting little fact there. The point is that rarely do we have the pith perfectly centered in the log. And that is part of the problem with cutting a log in half for making a bowl blank. Okay, now that we have all three of the logs separated from the larger log, we're going to fast forward and I'm going to show you these logs cut. I have them inside here and I'm going to show you these logs, and I want you guys to decide which one or ones, and it might be a trick question, there could be more than one possibly, which one of these logs are cut properly or split properly. Is it log A? Is it log B? Or is it log C? Or some combination of these three? Or perhaps all of them? All right, so back out in the field, I'm going to take the first log and I'm going to position it and I'm going to cut it in half. And I'm going to be honest with you. When I first started turning, I did a lot of this. I didn't really give this process much thought. I just said, well, I'm going to position the chainsaw in the middle and cut right down the middle. Boom, done. So here is our second log. Now in this log, I'm going to cut and I'm going to make sure the chainsaw blade goes right through that pith, because the pith, or the very center of that, it's really going to have a lot of tension in there and it can cause later cracking of the wood because of that added tension. But if we cut right through that pith, we're going to remove the pith and that tension, and it's going to make for a little bit easier bowl blanks for turning. So I'm going to cut right through the pith of this one. Now I'm on the third log. I know I want to cut through the pith, but I'm going to do something else as well. I'm going to make sure that the space on the sides of the pith are equal to one another. And I'm just going to use my fingers. I'm using my thumb and my finger, and I kind of lock it in position. I measure from the center or the pith out to the outside bark on one side and measure to the other side. And what I want to do is I want to make sure both those sides are equal. And that's where I'm going to make a line and cut through the log, through the pith. Now, this one looks a little weird because if you notice, as I'm cutting this, I've got one big thick side and I've got a skinny little side. I don't know. Okay, with all three pieces cut in half, let's take a look at these one more time. Here is log A, log B, and log C. Now let's look at log A. Log A, I position the chainsaw in the top center part of the log and slice the log right in half. Seems like I've got two equal halves. Everything should be great, right? Not so much. We've got two issues going on. First of all, I didn't hit the pith. The stress of this log is going to be focused in that pith. that stress is still in one half of this log. The other half doesn't have that stress. So now you might be thinking, okay, well, that other half should be great because there's no pith in it. Not so quick. Here's the problem with the other half. If you notice, the location of that pith was up on the side. So now I'm going to have all of the grain direction is really focused around that pith. So one side of the bowl is going to have wider grain than the other side. So as it dries, it's going to potentially distort and warp, very ununiformed, and it could look really odd when it dries. So we can put a scratch mark through log A. That's not how you want to do it. Let's take a look at log B. Okay, with log B, I did it. I got the chainsaw right through the pith. The stress is gone. No problem. This is going to work great. You can turn bowls from these two blanks without any problem. Except there is an issue. If you turn a bowl, either a regular bowl or a live edge bowl, with either one of these halves, what's going to happen? Your pith is off center. So those nice concentric rings of the grain of the wood are going to be up on one side of the bowl instead of down in the middle of the center. Now, you might say, nah, that's no big deal. You might be like, oh, you're getting a little OCD there, aren't you? You're getting a little anal retentive about making this perfect. Well, yes and no. There's two things. Aesthetically, it's going to be odd because you're going to have the center of the location of those rings up on one side of the bowl. But also, again, you're still going to have that drying, that ununiform drying process where the side of the bowl that's farther away from the pith has to dry more than the other side. So you could have cracking, you could introduce cracking, and you're going to introduce some weird warping and some distortion that you really don't need. So quite honestly, log B is not the best way to do it. All right, so let's go to log C. And in case you were wondering, yes, log C is the winner, and this is the way you want to go. Even though it might seem as if I did something wrong here by ending up with a big fat side and a skinny narrow side. So I took out the pith in the center of the log, which is great because that reduced that tension that's in the center of the log. But I also positioned the pith centered, and that's why I took the time to measure the distance around both sides of the pith to make sure they're equal from both sides of the log. And what that's doing is it's giving me a really balanced bowl blank that the pith is going to be right in the center of it. If I take the skinnier log and decide to make a live edge bowl out of that, I'll know that those beautiful concentric rings that are inside the bowl will go right down into the very middle of that bowl, and it'll look uniform and beautiful. Not only that, it's going to dry very evenly, and it's going to reduce the chance of a weird distorted look or cracks down the road. Same goes for the other half. Now, the other half is much larger than the small piece there. And that's fine. I can make a bigger bowl that has a closed rim. I can do all sorts of different things. It gives me more options. I don't have to have both pieces of one log being exactly the same. What I'm most interested in is making sure that I've cut out that pith and removed that tension, and I've centered the pith, whether it's going to be in the top of the bowl or in the bottom of the bowl in the case of a live edge bowl. So that is really the most important. If you picked log C as being correct, then you are right and you got it. That's what we're looking for. And you really need to take time with each log that you bring out into the ground and get ready to cut. Take a look at it, measure it, and mark it to make that cut. You can use a grease pencil, which is really good. I'll put a link to that below in the description so you can check that out. Grease pencil is great to put a mark there where you want that cut to go. It also helps you measure that distance. And you want to do that with each log because even though you have a big long branch or a log on the ground, there's a chance that pith is going to move a little bit inside there. So as you separate out each log, take the time to look and see where that pith is located and center it up and make your slices there. So now you know exactly how to cut smaller logs into half so that you have a nice centered, balanced blank for turning bowls. I want to make a little side note here as well, because I know I'm going to get these questions in the comments, and I'm always open for questions, as you know, and I try to respond to pretty much every question that gets sent to me either through the comments here or via email. And some of those questions that I can already anticipate is, what type of chainsaw blade do you use and why do you cut that way? Well, number one, it is a normal, regular chainsaw blade. There's nothing unusual about it as far as different teeth, either less teeth or more teeth. That's not the case. It's a regular chainsaw blade. Now, this is a larger chainsaw, and I will put a link in the description below so you can check that out. It's a 27-inch chainsaw, so it's a big chainsaw, and it's really designed for doing these long cuts and for cutting large logs, obviously. But the long cuts where I'm ripping out that grain, it's just like when we turn the side of the bowl. When we go around the side of the bowl, we're making big, wide cuts. Well, I'm doing the same thing with the chainsaw. It's just ripping those fibers out and pulling them back. You do need to pause every once in a while, wait till that chain comes to a complete stop, so for safety reasons, and pull those shavings out from underneath the chainsaw because they pile up underneath the chainsaw, obviously. And you want to make sure when you're using a chainsaw, don't ever let your blade hit the ground. The ground is made up of dirt and sand, and guess what? It's very abrasive and will take the sharpness of your chainsaw down almost immediately. If you happen to accidentally touch the ground with your chainsaw, what you want to do is immediately stop cutting at that point, because that sand or dirt in the blade getting beaten up against the wood is what's going to wear that blade out really quickly. You do have a chance of saving it and not dulling it so quickly if you can stop and immediately take the chainsaw out of the wood and then run it a little bit and run it so that it throws all that dirt and sand off of the blades and then continue cutting. I've had some decent luck with that. The best thing is to avoid getting into the dirt or the sand at all. You don't want that. So those are a few things I'm going to add to this, just kind of a side note as far as chainsaw work, and obviously make sure you're following all of the safety recommendations from your chainsaw manufacturer, and protect your eyes and your ears, and just be safe out there. You guys know what needs to be done. If you want to learn how to do much larger logs, which you really don't want to use this technique with larger logs, then check out my Treatable Understanding Greenwood online course. We go over all of that there. So check that out. I think you're going to really enjoy it. All right, guys, I hope you've enjoyed this video. And if you've liked it, do me a huge favor, and you know the routine. Yeah, the like button. Click that like button, please. And if you're not subscribing, please subscribe and click that bell, because I'll tell you what, I've got tons of other videos coming your way with loads of information that you're not going to want to miss. So be sure to subscribe. All right, guys, as always, until next time, happy turning.